Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head over to Germany once again, and we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. So these guys are actually a very recognisable beer brand in their local area. They are pretty big scale as well, I would say, and this particular beer is a style that I haven't covered all that much of on the channel. I actually found a bunch of these on Beers of Europe, so we'll be reviewing a few beers from this particular style category over the next little while, and I have to say I'm very, very curious to see how they turn out. But this is the first one of a couple that we're going to have a look at, and this is just the first one that I managed to write the notes for, so let's do this and see how we get on. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to head to Dusseldorf, which is of course home to the Altbier. We're going to have a look at my first beer from Brauerei Hannen, and that is of course the Hannen Alt. So this one comes in at 4.8% ABV, and as the name suggests, and as I've kind of hinted at, this one is an alt beer. So yeah, it's kind of interesting in that Dusseldorf, Köln and Dortmund area. You've got a little bit of a rivalry between the cities, and of course in Dortmund you have the Dortmunder Helles, in Köln you've got the Kölsch, and then in Dusseldorf you have the alt beers. So yeah, this is one of a few that I managed to pick up, as I said, from Beers of Europe, and I'm very curious to see how it's going to turn out, because I've had a few examples of this style over the years, but not many from Dusseldorf itself. So let's crack on then and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Hannen Brauerei. This is the very first time we're trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the German playlist along with a number of other things, and we will of course be adding to that over the next wee while. And do check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit about Hannen Brauerei, and I will apologise in advance for any bad German pronunciations. But yeah, the story of Hannen Brauerei goes back to the year 1725, when the Hausmann family took over an existing brewery in Willich, which is west of Düsseldorf, north of Mönchengladbach, and a little bit south of Krefeld. But this brewery passed down the family until the year 1917, when it merged with the Schmitz and Dicker breweries to form the Vereinigte Willicher Brauereien, or in English the United Willicher Breweries. And the Schmitz brewery was actually an old inn with a brewery, I guess a Brauerei Gasthof maybe you would call it, but this was in Willicher Markt. It dated from 1739, while the Dicker brewery hadn't been founded until the 19th century, about 1800 and something. But in 1920, the United Brewery purchased Hannen Brauerei from Korschenbroich, which is east of Mönchengladbach, and the company then became known as the Vereinigte Willicher Brauereien und Hannen Korschenbroich, and this company went on to become a big player in the Altbier market, which, as I say, is focused around the city of Dusseldorf. But in the 1960s, the individual sites in Korschenbroich and Willich became too small for the breweries, and so in 1964 the management chose to relocate the production to Mönchengladbach in the Neuwerk district, and the construction of a new brewery began in 1968 and was gradually moved, and it was, they gradually moved in there, from what I understand, between 1968 and 1975, and this was followed soon after by the administration of the company too, and this just became a big facility. But the brewery continued to grow until the late 1970s, when its market share began to drop, and then in 1988 the brewery became one of the first German breweries to experience a foreign takeover when it became part of the Carlsberg Group from Denmark. But later in 1999, Hannen bought the rights to Düsseldorf Gatzweiler Altbier, and then in 2003, the Neuwerk brewery was sold to the Oettinger brewery, and they brewed at their facility over the following years. Fasting forward to April of 2022, the Hannen Alt and Gatz Altbier brands were actually bought by Bottlen Brewery, which is an old Altbier brewery dating from 1266, and this was under the direction of Michael Hollmann, who had previously been the managing director of Hannen Brewery, and these brands will now be brewed independently but still distributed by Carlsberg. So yeah, they are now brewed by a smaller company in the Düsseldorf area, but yeah, Carlsberg is handling their distribution across the world, and that probably explains why I was able to get a bottle of this one here in Scotland actually. So yeah, kind of cool to see that this is a company that's kind of gone full circle, if you like. It started off as a very small kind of family company, it got bigger and bigger, it kind of merged with a few other local breweries, it got taken over by one of the conglomerates, and now it's kind of back in you know, a sort of company that's focusing on the history of the style, if you can say that. You know, it's back full circle, it's back under local ownership, but still using its big connections for its distribution. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Hannen Brauerei just now, and the, I guess it's more like a history of the Hannen brand, if you like, at this point. But yeah, if you do want to learn a little bit more about the company and things, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. But yeah, let's go on then and actually have a little look at the beer itself. That's everything we need to say about the historical side of things. So I have to say, the artwork on this one is pretty cool. I think, if I remember correctly, this is quite a recent artwork, and they changed it not too long ago from some of the older ones, which were a little bit more kind of classic, if you like. This one seems a little bit more modern. But there you can see the nice top label on this one, which is quite similar, and the bottle cap on this is quite nice as well. There you can see. I actually can't remember what I paid for this bottle. I think it might have been £2 or £3 or something, but no doubt in Dusseldorf it will cost something silly like €1 or €1.20, something like that. But yeah, as we said earlier, this one is a 4.8% Altbier. For those of you that don't know, Altbier is basically it's an ale, but its fermentation takes place at a relatively low temperature in comparison to other ales, to be honest with you. It's the same with Kolsch as well. It's those are ales, but low temperature fermentation ales. These beers are still light and drinkable, as you know, German lagers are and things, but they are technically ales. So remember, the technical difference between a lager and an ale is the type of yeast that you use and the temperature that the fermentation takes place. So lagers are fermented using bottom fermenting yeasts, and they ferment like 8 to 12 degrees Celsius roughly. Ales ferment using top fermented yeasts, and they do so at a slightly higher temperature, usually about 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. But the Altbier as a style, usually it's a kind of coppery colour. It's got a little bit of kind of brown sugary sweetness to it, a little bit of kind of brown bread and things, and then a little bit of a very slight red fruity character and a kind of German noble hop type flavour as well. So that's a very brief descriptor of the Altbier as a style. Now the other thing I'll point out as well is that you should normally, the Altbier glasses are usually, they're kind of like a tall tumbler, if you like, so they're usually quite tall and straight and flat. I don't have a glass that is kind of suitable for this one, so I'm going to go with a handy kind of stein, if you like. I think they do drink these out of tall steins in Dusseldorf as well, kind of similar glasses to what you would have with Kolsch. But yeah, anyway, let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. The Hannen Alt 4.8% ABV. Definitely cool to try. One of my first Alt beers from Dusseldorf itself, actually. This will be cool. So let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. You can see a little bit of smoke on the opening there, but yeah, let's do this. We'll try and make sure we get a good little bit of head on this one. Oh, that's going to pour quite nicely, I have to say. There we are. that is what you want. That is exactly what you want. I have to say I'm quite pleased with myself for that. So, anyway, before the head disappears too much on this one, you can see that we've managed to get a two-finger frothy, I would say kind of fawn coloured head on this one. You can see it's got lovely foamy bubbles to it. There's a few medium-sized ones in there and little bumps on the head. This is exactly what you want with a proper head on a German beer. It looks absolutely fabulous, but you can see it is starting to fade away already. So yeah, I have to say, I'm proud of myself for getting the pour right, because I got it wrong with the last German beer that I did in my nice PU glass. But yeah, this looks absolutely great. So colour-wise, it's kind of what you'd expect. If you shine the light through this, to you guys on the camera, it's actually appearing a good little bit darker than it actually is. This is a lovely kind of, it's actually almost the same, it's almost the same colour as the glass of the bottle in a sense, but it's got a little bit more of a red tint to it. It's definitely fair to describe this beer as being quite kind of coppery in colour, but it's almost a little bit like an unstained mahogany as well, to be honest with you. So yeah, remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well. But when it comes to alt beers, you know, you're not often going to have to care about that, if you like. I don't know if even the very small, kind of more American style breweries in the cities are playing around with and barrel aging these beers and stuff. But anyway, there's not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this beer. A few big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, and you can see that this one is pretty clear. It's pretty damn clear, this beer, so probably filtered. But yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about the appearance of this one. There's nothing surprising about this when you consider what style it is, to be honest with you. So yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma then and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Oh, yeah, aroma wise, this is pretty damn nice. Now, as you'll know, if you've watched the channel for any length of time, when it comes to different beer styles, I'm big into the more malty, kind of brown sugary styles of beer. I mean, growing up with the Scotch ales, the 80 shillings and so on, it kind of came naturally. And you know, I love the German Doppelbocks, the Dunkels, the Belgian quadruples, the American barley wines and things. You know, these beers are right up my street. So with Altbier being a kind of coppery, more malty style of beer, this is one that I probably will get on with quite well. But the aroma of this is very, very nice. It's got everything you would want. You've got a little bit of breadiness in there, a little bit of brown sugar, the typical German noble hop smoothness, and just a little touch of a slight red fruity character to it. It's a beautiful smelling beer. So let's take a bit of time and just analyse that aroma before we actually get stuck into this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, the backbone of this beer, absolutely, you've got that lovely kind of fresh rye brown wholemeal type bread. You've got a kind of bread crust of that forming the backbone of this beer. There's a little touch of woodiness to this one for sure, and that comes out a little bit more the more that you smell of the beer, to be quite honest. So yeah, lovely little bit of smooth woody character coming out of this one. That comes out a little bit further into the aftertaste. There's a wee touch of cracker in there, but yeah, you get a mix of different kinds of brown bread. There's a little bit of a kind of rye bready character for sure, which is quite sweet. You've got a wholemeal brown bread, which is a little bit drier and more kind of grainy, and then maybe there's a little bit of, like, you know, German pumpernickel bread or something like that. The bready notes in this one are very, very nice, in fact. But yeah, there's a little slight touch of nuttiness in there too, and then above that you start to get some more of the kind of brown sugary notes out of the beer. So it does have a very slight kind of leathery brown sugar character, but as I say, that's very, very slight. There's some nice kind of toasty caramelly notes coming out of the beer too, and then you've got this lovely kind of Beyond that, you've got this lovely sort of, you've got a bit of like a sweet caramel in the middle of the nose. You've got a little bit of a kind of toasty, biscuity caramel. You've got a little bit of a more toasty caramel, as we said, and a wee bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive, biscuity sort of thing going on with this one. I'm not sure how good a descriptor that is for Germans. I don't know if you get McVitie's digestives over in Germany. I never really looked for them, in fairness. But yeah, the maltiness that you get out of this beer, I think, is really very, very nice. But yeah, in terms of the malty side of things, I think that's everything we really need to say about this. I have to admit, when I think about this, if I was to smell this beer next to a German Dunkel, I think I might struggle actually to tell them apart. And obviously the technical differences of the Dunkel is a lager beer, the Altbier is an ale. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. That's where the name Alt comes from, is the fact that ale fermentation is an older technique than lager fermentation is. So yeah, but I do think in terms of, you know, smelling this beer, at least compared to some of the Dunkels I've had, I would struggle to point out which one would be the Altbier and which one would be the Dunkel. It's quite similar to that. But yeah, in terms of the hoppy side of things with this beer then, there's a lovely little touch of earthiness in there, a little bit of herbal character, typical German noble hop qualities. I would guess that the hops in this one are maybe from the Tecknang region in Baden-Württemberg. I think that's a bit closer than Hallertau, but be one of the two in any case. But yeah, a little bit of smooth earthiness, a little bit of herbal character. You've also got a nice little bit of kind of bright floral aromaticity to this one, and a bit of a brighter grassiness. Not too pungent, again, typical noble hop qualities, German noble hop qualities. But then yeah, you've also got a little bit of a fruity character coming out of this one. So yeah, aroma wise, this is great. The fruity side of things for me, you've got a very slight touch of red fruit to this one. It's maybe very slightly blackcurranty or very slightly figgy or something like this. There's a bit of sultana coming out of this beer, you know, dry white green grapes. It's got a little bit of an oily pear to it as well, for sure. And yeah, it's a kind of mix of all these sorts of things. But yeah, fruity wise, this beer is pretty damn nice. So as I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of your beers before you get stuck into them. That's always half the experience when it comes to trying these different things. But yeah, let's have a little look at this one then and see what it's all about. This one is the Hannen Altbier, Hannen Alt, from Brauerei Hannen in Düsseldorf, over in Germany. This is going to be really, really nice. So let's get stuck in. Slange, Skål, cheers, Prost, the first of a few Altbiers that you're going to see here on the channel over the next little while. Let's do this. Yeah, that's pretty nice. That is pretty nice, I have to say. What I'll say about this one, I was talking about the fact with the aroma that I would struggle to distinguish the this from a Dunkel, for example, but in the flavour it's a bit more obvious. You know, this has got a little bit more, you can kind of feel in the mouthfeel that this is an ale rather than a lager. It doesn't quite have the kind of crispness and things that you'd expect of, for example, yeah, you know, Augustiner Dunkel or something like that. You definitely get more of a vibe of an ale about this one, to be honest with you. But yeah, this one is really, really very nice. So it's a big thumbs up for me. And as I said earlier, I was pretty sure this would be a style that's kind of up my street. And if the other ones that we try are like this, then that statement will be correct. But yeah, this beer gives you everything you'd kind of expect from the style. You've got the lovely kind of brown breadiness there. You've got a bit of sweetness which comes out more and more into the aftertaste. You've got your noble hoppy qualities, and just that little bit of fruitiness. Very nicely done. Solid beer. And as I've said in many German reviews before, the Germans are the masters of the Germans are the masters of quality control, along with the Czechs. They really know what they're doing when they produce beer on the big scale. But let's break this one down and describe the flavour a little bit more in depth, as we always do. So, if we go to the middle third of your palate with this beer, the backbone, as you often get, is that lovely bread crusty character. So you've got a kind of almost rye bread crusty character there, sitting in the base of the sitting in the base part of your palate. As you move further forward on that middle third of your tongue, you get a little touch of like woodiness coming in there, and then the further into the aftertaste you go with that, it sort of develops into a little bit more of a kind of nutty character. So yeah, the way this beer goes together in that sense is really nice. So above the bread crusty layer, you start to get the actual breadiness out of the beer. So, and this is very layered. You can feel there's a little bit of a rye bready character in there, which it's not too sweet a rye bread. It has a little bit of dryness to it. Above that, you get a more kind of like pumpernickel-y type bread, like a slightly sweeter rye type bread, and then you get the wholemeal brown bread. So you've got 3 different layers of bread in there coming out of this one, which is pretty nice too. And the thing you'll find with this beer is that the more you drink of it, the fuller the flavour becomes. Yeah, it gets a little bit drier the further into the aftertaste too. But yeah, above the kind of the wholemeal brown bready layer at the top, you start to get the brown sugars. And on the first layer of the brown sugars, it's got a little bit of a more... It has got a little bit more of a kind of... Yeah, it's got a little bit of a kind of leathery character, then a wee bit of a kind of more toasty brown sugary character within that too. So, leathery brown sugar, toasty brown sugar, and then above all of that, you start to get a more sweet, kind of caramelly note out of this one. If you go to the dead centre of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit of a straight up caramel there. And then as you move, that's the concentration of the alcohol in this one. It's like 4.8% ABV, but you know, you still feel the malty beers for me will show you a little bit of that. But in the dead centre of your palate, you can feel that that's the concentration of the brown sugar, so that's where the alcohol's concentrating. As you move further out from that, it's got a little bit more of a McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing to it. Underneath, you've got a toasty brown sugary character, and then a more sort of leathery brown sugary layer underneath, and that goes together really quite well. Yeah. So, yeah, the way that that goes together, that middle third of your palate, is really quite nice, and you get a wee bit more of the woodiness and nuttiness just pushing its way out the further into the aftertaste you go. But yeah, that's the middle third of the palate covered in this one. Let's go to the back third of the palate. As I always say, the back third of your palate will give you similar flavours, but they'll come out in different intensities, and you've got the yeastiness in there too. But remember that trend, the further forward on the palate you go, the sweeter the flavours tend to be. The further back you go, the drier and more bitter they tend to be. So yeah, in that border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a kind of bready build up in there, kind of wholemeal brown bread in the base, and then a little bit more of a kind of it's a little bit more of a rye bread in the base and a bit more of a wholemeal brown bready character further up. But yeah, you've got the kind of bread, the kind of rye bread crust in the bottom layer there, which feels a little bit drier. Of course, above that you get a wee bit of like a crackery note almost, which is interesting, like Jacob's cream cracker. Then you've got the rye bready character, which feels a little bit taller and a little bit more airy, but drier again. Then you've got the kind of sweeter pumpernickel-y bread, which feels taller and more airy as well. Then you've got the wholemeal brown bread at the top, which feels really quite taller and more airy. And then some of the kind of leathery brown sugars just creep over the top of that, and that forms the top part of the maltiness on the back third of your palate. But above everything else, you have more of the, as I say, you have more of the, yeah, you've got more of the kind of yeasty character coming out of this one, which is interesting. And obviously, another thing with ales compared to lagers is ales will show you a little bit more yeasty character, I would say as well. So yeah, above everything else, on that back third of your palate, you get a really nice, you get the yeasty character coming out. And the yeastiness for me in this beer, it's like quite a dry but dense brown bready character. Yeah, really nice dry dense brown bready character, a little bit of woodiness and things in there, and then it's kind of wrapped in, it's almost like it's wrapped in a sort of honeycomb kind of character, to be honest with you. So yeah, the way that that goes together is really very nice, in fact. But yeah, the way that the beer goes together in that sense is really nice. So yeah, you've got the whole, yeah, the yeasty character just adds that little bit more depth to the beer too. So like I say, a dense, sweet kind of pumpernickel-y wholemeal kind of bread in the middle, wrapped with a little bit of like honeycomb. I always get honeycomb in the back third of the palate for some reason, and there's a wee bit of woody and crackery character too. But yeah, back third of the palate, you've got a nice, you can feel the flavour is definitely taller, and as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But the malty and yeasty side of this beer is really quite nice, and that's probably where the focus is with this one, being an ale rather than a lager in this case. But yeah, in terms of the hoppy side of things, it's kind of what you'd expect. In the back corners of the palate, there's a nice little bit of earthiness there. The beer does have a little bit of bitterness, incidentally, to it, which is quite interesting. As you move further forward, it gets a little bit more herbal, and as you push toward the front corners of your palate, you get a little bit of floral aromaticity, and then round the front curve of the tongue, it's a bit lighter and grassy. The grassiness and the floral character, in this one are quite, they're quite interesting actually, but they're not too bright. I think the earthiness and the herbal character actually shows up in this one a bit more. So that's maybe the influence of the yeast or just the general maltiness of the beer. But that's quite interesting that the Altbier is a bit different in that sense. But I'll need to try a few more to get a proper view of what's going on with this style in terms of hoppiness and things. But yeah, good little bit of hoppy character showing its head in this one. Let's look at the front third of your palate and the kind of fruity side of things. So yeah, the fruity side of the front third of your palate then, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there with this one, so you can feel the kind of rye bread in the base, but then you get a little bit of a sweeter pumpernickel on that other bit. But then the base of the front third of your palate, you get the kind of rye bready bread crust, the kind of sweeter pumpernickel note, the a bit of the wholemeal brown bread on top, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, for me, the fruity esters in this one are quite interesting. So let's take a little look at those. When you first take the beer in, it has a little bit of a kind of red fruity character to it. It's a little bit like black curranty or very slightly figgy. It's kind of like that. But then when the rest of the beer mellows out, if you go to the back of that front third of your palate, It has a little bit of like an almost datey type character to it. I think dates is maybe a good descriptor of this one. So it's a little bit datey. You get a little bit of this kind of sultana type quality as well. As you move further forward toward the middle of that front third of your palate, it has a little bit of a kind of like oily, peary type character. But then as you move into the front half of the front third of your palate, it gives you a wee bit more like, it's got just a little tiny touch of like dry blackcurrant to it, and then like a teeny little bit of fig or something like that. So for me, mix of oily pear and sultana on one side, but the impact flavour is kind of like blackcurranty or something like that. So yeah, it's interesting, the fruity character in this beer, I have to say. Yeah, mix of oily pear and sultanas and dates and stuff with a wee touch of like blackcurranty red fruit for me. But yeah, I think this has been really nice. It's been cool to try one of my first Altbiers from Dusseldorf itself. So we'll need to actually go to the city and try some of these things at source and make some out and about videos. That's definitely a goal for the channel going forward. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for the tasting section. Just to round off the whole review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. For me, this beer is like top end of light bodied, bottom end of mid bodied. I think bottom end of mid bodied is probably where I would go with this one. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It has that typical German Brauhaus type smoothness to it, as I would say. The mass produced beers, the bigger produced beers like this, do feel a bit cleaner than the ones you'll find in the Brauhauses and stuff. The unpasteurised stuff can be very nice too. But yeah, for me, it's a bit of a slick mouthfeel to it. It does feel very, very clean. And yeah, carbonation is lovely and smooth in this. In terms of IBUs, I think this beer is maybe about 25-ish IBUs. It does have a good little bit of dryness to it, so that puts the kind of perceived bitterness in this beer up a little bit, I would say. But yeah, the malt base in this one, it's got a lovely dryness underneath, smoothness in the middle, and then a little bit of a kind of dry sweetness on top. As I said, I think this is about 20 or 25-ish IBUs. It gets a little bit more bitter and dry the further into the aftertaste that you go. Then you've got a really nice kind of sweet, oily fruitiness coming out of this one too. Quite a dry, fruity character as well, I hasten to add. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in my mind is really, really quite nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This has been really interesting to try, and I look forward to trying the other Altbiers that I've got out there to look at. So yeah, this one was the Hannen from Hannen Brauerei in Düsseldorf in Germany. It's been really cool to try this one, a 4.8% Altbier from the source of Altbier. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Hannen Brauerei as well. And like I said, we will be looking at a few Kulches, Altbiers and Dortmunder Helles on the channel over the next little while. So if you're into your traditional German beers, stay tuned and you'll be getting some nice reviews. But in the meantime, check out my social media, check out Hannen Brauerei's social media, and I will see you guys again very, very soon. Slàinte, skål, cheers and prost.